Good morning. Lesson 6, Ecclesiastes 3. For everything, there is a time and a season under heaven, a time to embrace, a time to refrain from embracing, a time to love and a time to hate. Now, the irony of the lesson this week is that Valentine's Day is this weekend, and Valentine's Day is a part of our culture. Do I like it? No. Do I like Valentine's Day, that is? No. Do I love it? Yeah. Is either one of them a true statement? Well, yeah. See, we humans love to love. We love to love. We hate to love. We love to embrace. We like to hug. We don't like to hug. We like to touch. We pinch body parts to show we love. We hold hands. We put our arms around others. We take time to embrace. We take time to stop embracing. We take time to love. We take time to hate. Some of us are bigger huggers than others. Some of us need physical touch. And I have 3 kids. I've often said I have one of each. One is a hugger, one's a toucher. Another is a hands-off, leave me alone. We have some unique family photos of when the kids are little, and the middle one would be putting his arms around his sisters, and one would be leaning into him, and the other would be going, ah! It's probably the same in my family. If you looked at all your families, you're going to find people who are just touchy, huggy. And then I met these people who hug all the time. And every time they talked on the phone, before they hung up, they said, I love you lots. Really? Not really that they said it, but they meant it. And I couldn't remember hearing that very much, if any, growing up. We didn't hug, we didn't embrace, we didn't really touch much. We were Norwegian, Scottish, German, ornery, all rolled into one culture. So who's right? Well, both are. The awkward need to relax and the lovers need to choose carefully. Sometimes the quest to push love is interpreted as forceful. And sometimes the heart that stands off is interpreted as cold. Neither are true. It's a matter of how one grows up and how one expresses love. So just when I had it figured out, I married Jim. Jim learned firsthand it, involuntarily embracing. Now, he came to church with me, and the church had greeters. Now, the greeters stood one on each side of the door. Normal people would shake hands and greet. Normal weren't Flora or Lillian. Both were well-bosomed women, and neither took their greeting with a grain of salt. They greeted you with a sandwich. You were in the middle, Lillian on one side, Flora on the other. There was no way that you were going to mistake that you had been greeted, embraced, and perhaps a bit embarrassed by their expressions of love. So love. Love is always active. It's never static. We have our ways of expressing love, but the one factor that we cannot control is that love is motion. Love has to be motion. Even when it's standing still, it's still moving. Love moves the heart, and unless you have an X-ray machine, you won't always see love working. That's one of the beautiful things about love. Love moves beneath the surface of our heart, and embracing is just one of the many responses to love. The contrast to time to embrace is a time to refrain from embracing. And it seems to be direct opposites, but we're going to look at it more as just spending time alone than being the opposite of hugging. But let's define embrace. Embrace is to hold someone close or something close as a sign of affection, accepting willingly and enthusiastically receiving it. So there's a time to bring things into your heart, and there's a time to push them away. So if we go back and reword Ecclesiastes 3, there's a time to bring to your heart something that has meaning, and a time to separate yourself from things. There's a time to embrace and a time to part. And it's not always the embracing of others that you want, like Jim's exciting experiences with Lily and Flora. Think of the Old Testament when Esau met Jacob after years of separation. Now, Jacob was worried, and rightly so. He really wasn't sure if embracing Esau was going to stab his back. We sometimes go into an embrace with baggage in our heart, and Jacob had stolen Esau's birthright. Jacob really wasn't sure he wanted to embrace. Esau gave him no option. See, there's a vulnerability of hugging people, and especially people you've hurt. Sometimes the memories are larger in our minds than they are the other person, and sometimes the embracing is an obligation. But for the most time, you feel the purity of a hug. You just feel it. Embraces that fall short of that are like the handshakes that are like dead fish. But it doesn't mean the embrace or the hug didn't have meaning. It's just kind of different than what we expected. So let's take a look at 3 kinds of love. We have the spiritual love, and we have the social love, and we have the sexual love. John 15:2 starts right off the bat with a simple way to love. Now, this is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. So rather than the Nike logo that says just do it, it should be the Christian mantra, just love it. But loving is an action. It's not an immovable object, and it goes on in the next few verses to kind of explain the divisions of love. Now, I'm making the assumptions that they're divisions because there's the word greater, and it comes in verse 13. If something is greater, other things must be lesser. If something is fatter, other things must be thinner. If something is more, there has to be less. So the top of the ladder that we're going to climb to is where we're going to start with loving. But how does one get to the top of the ladder from starting at the bottom? I've tried it and it doesn't work. But if we continue to read, we find that the process of loving isn't easy and it's different to apply. So Jesus used phrases like lay down his life, be a servant, do, being chosen, bringing forth fruit, and he ends the whole phrase with loving even more. So love is a choice, love is an action. Now, I remember when I was a kid, our father told us that there was somebody he didn't like. And we were shocked because this man was a member of the church. And then my father said that even though he didn't like him, he loved him. And that love got him over the like. Loving people is choosing to put them in front of you. So even at the line of Walmart or stepping back at Quick Trip and letting someone go in front of you. Sure, you may not know them, but you've chosen to be active and loving by putting their needs before your own. Love is not a feeling. You know, this time of year we hear the old songs. Feelings, nothing more than feelings. Trying to forget my feelings of love. Or the one that I really like. I can't stop this feeling deep inside of me. Baby, you don't realize what you do to me. Of course, then the old Elvis, and I can't help falling in love with you. Or the Elton John, it's a little bit funny, this feeling inside. I'm not one of those who can easily hide. Or perhaps the most popular love song of all. Love is a feeling you feel when you feel like you're gonna get a feeling that you've never felt before. So our culture puts love and feeling kind of in the same ball. There's a place for love, there's a place for feelings of love, there's a place for sex, there's a place for romance. If you're in love, there's a place and a time for it. If you aren't in love, or you've never been in love, there's still hope. But the most important thing is you will make a horrible lover if you haven't learned to love as a friend and love as Jesus asks you to. So marriage is not about flowers, candy hearts, and cards, although they're nice. It's about who is standing in my side of the line living life with me. Now, had I thought more about getting married, I might have chickened out. I was almost 30, hadn't married yet, and you know, you'd think you're looking for the soulmate. Well, there is no such thing as a soulmate. It's simply about choosing to live life with someone, and they become the one in your corner who holds the towel, who uses the towel, and who washes the towel. A little of a boxing analogy there. Now, I'm not sure Jim has ever washed the towels, but he's held the towel a lot and he's used the towel a lot. So love for so long has been put in that basket of that warm fuzzy yarn, and if it doesn't feel right, then it must not be love. But love is an action because one chooses to love. It's a commitment. I will love this person despite, not because of their ability to love me. That's what Christ did for us. While we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. That's love without anything on our end. That's what Jesus meant by loving people. That kind of love brings us to lay down our life, to do, to serve, to put other people's needs in the front burner and ours in the back, and love in action. So you've heard of the different kinds of loves. So we have agape. Agape is God's love for mankind. We have phileo, is the love that unites believers, and storge, which is a family kind of love, familiar kind of love, and then eros, which is the romantic love. Now, I think we have to start at the top of the ladder with God's love, because agape is the only way to truly understand love. But our human nature wants to feel love, the romantic kind of love, before we act on love with the love God asks us. Social love, or phileo, which is the root meaning of Philadelphia, or the city of brotherly love, We all want that. And then there's the word storge love, which brings us together in communities. It seems as we humans like to focus on the eros more than we do the storge, or the love that pulls people together. Romantic love, though, is a lot of fun and needed in our world, it's not the answer for every situation. God's love, agape, is the way to truly understand and to build on the remainder of those other loves. So there's a time to embrace, a time to make love, and a time to bring us to a time to refrain from embracing, and a time to abstain from embracing. That very word abstain is kind of harsh. According to Webster, it's choosing not to do something. So to be deliberately, it's not stepping away from Aunt Ethel when she comes at you. It's not going to the family reunion so you don't have to endure the hugs and cheek pinches. That's an abstaining, but that's more avoiding than abstaining. So how do we intentionally not hug, not love, step away from the frantic life we live, and find ourselves a closet? Well, Jesus did this well. In John, he did not go with the disciples in the boat. He went away to be alone. He often went to the wilderness. He often got up early to pray. But being alone isn't just what solitude's about. Solitude is a little different. So Richard Foster said, loneliness is inner emptiness. Solitude is inner fulfillment. So there's a time to be alone and to step back from everything that's happening around you. And inner solitude is about centering who we are. We can listen to God's voice and speak to Him when we find ourselves with just God. The distractions of our culture often just don't give us a chance to be alone. There's always someone speaking, there's something happening, there's horns honking, there's children crying, there's people calling on the phone. And I am convinced that if there were cell phones in the Bible, Jesus would have been throwing them on the ground just like He turned over the tables in the temple. See, the focus of life changed from selling for needs at the temple to making money. And that's so much as what our life we find ourselves now. Our focus is on the phone being an added plus in our lives. It goes now to controlling our lives. So solitude, it doesn't just happen. Well, actually, very few things in life just happen. So I have in my cupboard, in my pantry, I have all the things I need for a wonderful supper. So far in my 60+ years of living, never has supper appeared on the table just because I had the ingredients in the pantry. There really has to be an intentional act for supper to go from the pantry to the table. There's a few ways to make solitude a practice and a time and a season in your life. One would be just to take advantage of the little moments. A cup of coffee. Okay, now I haven't started drinking coffee yet, but if I did, just a cup of coffee. Or taking a walk, or waking up and just laying in bed for a few minutes before the day starts. Just being alone with God. Also develop a time of actual, this is my quiet place. Now I used to have a chair. It's long gone now, but it was Grandma Campbell's chair. It was not comfortable. It was ugly. It didn't fit any kind of decoration motive that I have, if I had one. But it was Grandma's chair. And I would go sit in that chair and the world would feel different and look different. It was my quiet place. Another option is to use your words with purpose. Now, I'm not talking about talking. I'm talking about not talking. Spend a day choosing not to respond with words when someone says something. Refrain from words. Just don't talk. Just think about things and refrain from the first thing that comes to your mind. Just choose that bit of solitude. Smiles go a long way. But of course, the bigger refrain from embracing or choosing solitude would be a quiet retreat. Now, we have had pastors go to our cabin for a week of quiet, and it's not just quiet because they choose it to be. There's no Wi-Fi, there's no TV antenna, there's only old movies and old TV, and there's no one for miles. It's quiet, especially in winter. There's nothing to do except ice fish, haul wood, or build a snowman. But having a quiet retreat does focus your heart on things that sometimes don't come to the surface because of the noise and the level of action in our lives. So we've seen the seasons come and go. And you know, it wasn't that long ago that we were eating turkey and being grateful at Thanksgiving. Then Christmas came. And with all its glory that was missing because of COVID, and there was less programs and less things you could do, is more amazing because ironically more people decorated for Christmas this year than ever. You couldn't find lights in Menards. And more families were together because they had to be. And now we have the season of Valentine's Day. And I have a feeling, because we've been together a lot, some of the lovey-dovey sweetie pie moments might not be as much as they've been in years past when everybody was gone and running around like a chicken with their head cut off. So seasons come and go, and it's not going to be long before it'll be St. Patrick's Day, which really nobody cares about except people who like to drink and color their hair green. And then we have Easter, then we have Mother's Day, and then we have Father's Day. See, seasons come and go. There is a time to love and a time to hate. Oh, I almost forgot the hate part. Now, I've heard a saying that there's a thin line between love and hate, and it's about 1/2 inch. So I slept in the same bed as my sister for many years. We really didn't like each other when we were younger. She was the annoying big sister, and I was the perfect baby of the family. Now, I'm sure she might remember it as she was the mature, responsible one, and I was the spoiled brat. But I'm going to stick with my definition. But regardless of what we thought, we were sleeping in a double bed with no heat upstairs in an old farmhouse. There was an invisible line you didn't cross over in that bed. Well, that is until it got really cold and you needed to get warm. And you know, things have changed. That season is over. We grew up. The time and season for that is over. Other seasons are coming and going, and I'm thankful that things change. There was a time and a season in life where I didn't really know how to love people who were different than me. I learned that loving others starts with the simple act of being together. It wasn't conditional on what you did or who you were or what you believed. And when I spent time with people I deemed either too worthy or not worthy enough of my presence, then I started to understand that love has nothing to do with what I was or where I'd been. It was who I was and who I was with at the time. So love, we learn, we discover, we figure out how to love people. But the word hate, well, that's a word we don't really want to use much. We tell our kids, don't say that, don't use that word hate. We desperately try to undo the hate in our world that has discriminated upon and stolen from and destroyed thoroughly and labeled unfairly. The culture of our world seems to go from love everyone to hate everything, and the line was a lot thinner than that imaginary line in the bed growing up. Don't cross from love to hate. And yet, how do we cross a line that changes with each of our personal definitions of hate? I hate torrential downpours. I hate pepperoni pizza. I hate, and we insert someone's name. I hate politics. I hate this car. I hate these pants. I hate the way I feel. You know, these statements are some of the things we have said, and yet, what are we saying? Hate definition is to have an intense or passionate dislike for something or someone. Synonyms would be loathing, detest, abhor, abominate. Those aren't Sunday school words. Our culture has taken words like this and made it common for descriptions of not simply things, but people. People don't just not like something anymore. It seems there must be an intense feeling attached. So how does a Christian stand alongside the word hate? Perhaps the opposite, the word love in our everyday lives. What does God think about hating? What does God say about hating? Proverbs reminds us that hatred stirs up strife, but love covers a multitude of sins. Now, Proverbs also reminds us that God hates things. God has an intense feeling about certain things. Those should be the things that we take a stand against also. So love what God loves. Hate what God hates. Proverbs 6, 16 through 19 talks about specifically what those things would be: a haughty eyes, lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, hearts that devise wicked evil schemes, feet quick to rush into evil, false witnesses, and a person who stirs up conflict in the community. Now those are big words, but what do they mean? Haughty means to be arrogant and superior. A lying tongue is someone whose words we can't trust. Hands that kill the innocent of the world, those who think evil ways to ruin other people's lives, people who turn on the speed when it comes to doing wrong things, those who tell lies about others, and those who turn a loving community against itself. God hates those things. So love not things that God doesn't love. In a culture we're living in, we could probably name situations that we've seen in the last 3 months where this has been lived out. There has been a time of hate. There is a time and a season, a time to embrace, a time to refrain from embracing, a time to love, and a time to hate. You know, there's that song that Ecclesiastes 3 was made popular by the Byrds called Turn, Turn, Turn. And it's written about a search for peace, and most of the words were taken right out of Ecclesiastes 3, except for one line. I pray it's not too late. It was a desperate advocation for peace. So how do we deal with the opposites of Ecclesiastes 3? We focus on love. How do we worry about what we think or what someone else dislikes? We focus on love. What do we say when people spew hatred into the air? Respond with love. If the opposites define the extremes, then so should our responses define who we reflect. God loves, I love. God hates. I channel what I think and how I behave, so I'm aware that what I do is opposite of the things that God hates. What do I do when others say or do things that push God's list of things he hates? I love them. My showing them love is more powerful than any other response could be. So to everything there is a time and a season. Be the ones with your arms out ready to embrace. Take advantage of the moments of solitude. Love in word and in deed, and when hate motivates others' hearts, you be ready to respond in love. So some things to think about. So how did your family embrace? Our family was not a hugging family. Some families pinch cheeks. Some do the Italian fake job of kissing to each side of the cheek. Some bear hug. Some squeeze the life out of you, and others just kind of grunt. How has your love language for embracing changed through the years? Grandpa Charlie, no relation, just in Grandpa in heart. He'd come up to you and he'd put his arm around you and he'd just take a little bit of this little bit of fat, if he could find any on you, and give you a little pinch. And first few times it happens, the kids are going, oh, and then they're going, okay. And if Grandpa Charlie wouldn't have done that, that would have been odd to them, because that was his way. He wasn't really going to hug you, but he was going to do that. Lots of different ways we embrace, and maybe we don't necessarily hug, embrace. Grandpa Frank, another one of those heart grandpas. You didn't leave without giving Grandpa Frank a hug. You didn't. And it wasn't so much obligation as you were compelled to. And there are people who hug you because they hug everybody, and then there's people who hug you. And we pull things to ourselves. We embrace things that mean something to us. And the same goes with people. But some people just aren't as comfortable with the physical touch. So it's interesting how every family has a different way of greeting, a different way of embracing maybe, without the physical touch. So as you've aged, as you've grown up, which some of us never sure we have, how has your love language for embracing changed through the years? What things have changed in your life to either take on more of an embracing, hugging role, to be more distant? Who you married really defines that a lot. I have learned a few things by dealing with a lot of my older single friends, and that's especially if one of the mates has passed on, they don't get hugs anymore. And I think that was one of the things for Grandpa Frank was, Nita was gone. He didn't get hugs anymore, and that was an important part of his love language. And that's maybe something to think about as you minister and care for and love some of our elderly, is if they're alone, and that physical touch that we desperately need. I don't know where it is, but Grandpa Frank gave us all a note about hugging. And I've saved it, I just don't know where it is. But it was about the therapeutical benefits of a hug every day. It was just very, very interesting. And he believed it and he lived it. This is the second question. What does an embrace mean to you? What does a hug mean to you? What do you embrace? Now think about a fish hug and a bear hug. Okay? Which defines you? The fish, limp, You've shook hands with people who it's like, and then you've shook hands with people who demand the handshake. Which defines you? And how do you turn that and think about the things you embrace, not just people? What things do you embrace with a fishy, oh, I'll handle it? And what things do you embrace with a bear hug? And if you've ever had a bear hug from a big man, you feel like you're going to get suffocated. But you know you've been hugged. And you know that that kind of a drawing you into their heart is true and real. So what things do you grab a hold of and not want to let go in comparison to the things you just give a feeble little squeeze and let it go? Number 3, solitude isn't punishment like time out in your room. Solitude's a discipline. It's something we learn to do. So a time out to refrain from embracing means there's times we step back and look at life. So what do those times do to open your mind and help you reconnect with God? Now, we were kids. I grew up in a culture where we got spanked. And a spanking, not going to debate the effects of spanking, pro or con. But what I remember, the punishments I remember, and you might laugh at this, but we only had one bike in our family. And so I think we only had the one bike. We might have had 2 bikes because I don't have a good memory. But we played cops and robbers, 4 kids. So if we only had 1 or 2 bikes, the robbers got the bikes and the cops had to be on foot. And I might have that all mixed up. But I remember getting in trouble and having to go to my room for the night. And I remember laying, so we had windows that went all the way down to the floor, so we could kind of just lay on the floor and our head would be out the window. And we didn't have air conditioning in our house. That was the closest it got on a hot night. I remember watching the other 3 kids play cops and robbers, and I felt left out. I was in solitude. I was in timeout. That was effective because I had to be alone in my room, and I probably had to go to my room without supper. So I probably was hungry, but that made a big impact, more than a whooping did, because I was missing something. I had to be set apart. So being set apart gets our attention. How about if we did it intentionally? I mean, I will go to the cabin, and there's times where I don't turn the radio on. I do nothing. I'll just go sit by the campfire. I'll watch the lake. I'll kick the ball to the dog. Just quiet. Peace and quiet. And there's something incredibly therapeutic about that. It's a wonderful place to go talk to God. It's a place to think. Nobody's going to bother me. Can't see a neighbor for can't see the neighbors anyway, and there's 8 miles to the closest town. There's just no people. And it's a solitude that is a welcome relief, not a time out in my bedroom while I watch the rest of the kids have fun playing. So what can you do tomorrow that brings you one step closer to embracing something that you've been putting off or refraining from holding close to you, that needs to have a grip on your heart? So there's things that we put off embracing because we don't want to, and there's things that we put off embracing because it's going to be hard to, and there's things we put off embracing because we have no better excuse. But there's things also that we need to bring to our heart. So what can you do tomorrow that brings those things one step closer to you embracing a relationship? Maybe quiet time, maybe prayer time, maybe time to be involved more in church, maybe embrace doing more for your community. What is something that you need to embrace, that you've been refraining from embracing, that would honor God and change your approach to your faith walk? And then there's a time that love is never static, it's always action. So what has love moved you to do lately? Now we're all moved to do some things by need, desperate need. I don't have any more clean white towels. I need to wash towels. Okay, that's a need. I need to, get some groceries today. That's a need. But that's not moved by love. That's moved by need. So what has love moved you to do lately? Love is always active. Love is always moving behind the scenes. So what is God moving in your heart and creating you through love to do something? That might take some thought. A time to love and a time to hate. What do you love only because you have to? What is the motivation behind love that changes the way you think about things emotionally? Now, just a little caveat. Babies, diapers. You change the diaper because you love the baby, not because you love changing diapers. Although there might be some of you who really, really love that. Maybe a better way to think about it is, what do you do in life that you do out of love, not out of like? There's a lot of things we do because we have to do them. But there's some things we do out of the passionate love. And not just because we like it. We love it. We're drawn to it. We're pulled through it. What powerful tool is love using for you to do something out of love that you may never have done before? Hate is a powerful word that we want mostly eliminated from our homes. We may not like something, but we don't need to use the word hate. But how do we encounter those who use the word very flippantly? And how do we counter people who say they love everything? So we have people that hate things, and we have people that love everything. They hate everything, and people that love everything. How do we come upon people like that in our everyday and create dialogue that addresses that there's a time to love and a time to hate versus the flippant use of words? How do we eliminate using the word hate for things that don't have meaning? God's list of hate has meaning. I hate pepperoni pizza has no meaning. How can we change the words that we use to have intentional purpose, not just flippantly use them? And I know I do it more than I think I do, because I'll catch myself. So maybe you might have to think about that for a bit. And lastly, how can we return the intensity for the word hate that it deserves for things that are evil and that God abhors? What comforts are we willing to give up loving, not the things that God doesn't love? Case in point, if we look at the last 6 months, we've seen a lot of things changing in our culture that fit the list of things God hates. Someone that I'm acquainted with, I don't know her very well, but I know her well enough to follow what she's doing, is quite an advocate for pro-life and teaching young women before they go ahead with an abortion what life can look like. Not just the fear and panic of a pregnancy, but that abortion does not have to be an issue. That is her goal mission. That is her life. And I'm not saying that we all need to jump on the bandwagon, but there are things that God hates that we do rub shoulders with. How can we take the intensity of that word hate? Because that is a word that fits. God hates things. It's extreme strong dislike. How can we just take the word for those things? Not use the word hate for the pizzas and the pair of pants that you don't like, but for the things that God hates. How can we take back the intensity of that word? But then again, what comforts are we willing to give up to back God on the things he detests, that go against his very nature? What are we willing to stand up and say, that's something God doesn't approve of and God hates? How can I purposefully live my life to try to make a difference in people's lives with the things that God does not like? How can I protect people's hearts? How can I come lovingly alongside them and show them what they're doing is actually one of the things God doesn't like? How can I convince them through the Holy Spirit that they are made in the image of God? God loves them regardless. how can we take this, a time to embrace, a time to be alone, have some solitude, a time to love and a time to hate. How can we take each one of those 4 things, give their value to where their value is, and let that change the way we go about our everyday? Just some things to think about. Thanks.